David Buss, studies from people in the evolutionary psychology space indicate that sexual variety is very important to men. And apparently it's significantly more important to men than it is to women. Have you encountered that in practice? And what's your perspective on the issue of sexual variety in a long-term relationship, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right. We I did actually read that piece of research, and there was another aspect to it, which was what do men regret most? If they've been in a kind of a long-term relationship, or if they had more time, or if they had more opportunity, what would they do? They would have more variety. And whereas women, that's not the case. Well, I mean, that's just simple evolution. Women, we survived, and our children survived by honing in on one partner who would protect and mind us, and or a family or a unit. Whereas for men, for their genes, if you like, to continue successfully, well, the more women they impregnated, the more likely their gene pool was going to survive. So I think it's it's very evolutionary in that sense. But I think that it's of course we've moved into the monogamous space, but it is kind of interesting that is changing again. And I think it is changing again. I mean, it's changing, you could say, is it because we're living longer? Is it because marriages now are much longer? And 50% of marriages in the Western world, not necessarily in Ireland, but in general and in the States, and we tend to follow that model gradually over time, it's 50% of marriages break. So I think we have to ready ourselves for that reality. And I think there is something changing. I don't think it's actually clear exactly what's changing yet, but I don't think it's that men are rushing back to the variety factor, if you like. I don't think it's that. I think it is myself that people recognize the challenge of marriage, and over time, maybe in order to let those marriages survive, maybe some people are moving towards the variety. There may be an aspect of, I see that quite little, certainly in Ireland. I see that very little. It does happen, but it's fairly little, fairly small in numbers. Now, I'm not the complete barometer on that, but I suppose I'm getting as much exposure to it as probably any other clinician around. I think there is something changing though also in younger people. I was speaking to someone in Germany, and they were saying young people are less interested in marriage. Now, in Ireland, they're very in the marriage space still. That could be our religious sort of and traditional kind of hangover time, so to speak. But, when you speak to people in Europe, in younger people, young professionals in Europe, they're looking more for partners that maybe for a period of time. They're not racing for marriage. They're looking for partnership. They're maybe not also racing towards children. And so the issue of children is way down the line. And I think that's kind of interesting. Marriage is getting deferred and deferred and deferred. Now, we know it's got a little deferred here, and the average age here is more like 36 for guys, 34 for girls. But I think just and marriage rates in Ireland are still quite good. They're still quite high. But in other countries, I think there's a slightly different dynamic happening.
Do you think there's an option for kind of a tiered pricing when it comes to marriage? And what I mean by in terms of longevity, so you say you have a lifelong marriage, you have a 15-year marriage, you have a 5-year marriage. And at the end of that time period, you can choose to renew or not. What's your thought on that one?
Well, it's the 7-year itch thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot
for divorce, like it might inhibit these catastrophic divorces.
Yes, that there would be like a tiered almost commitment.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. In some respects, I mean, the complexity of, the family system has served society very well, if you think of it that way. It has served us well because it is, it allows for connection, it allows for bonding, it allows for stability, security. I think it also provides for an sort of an interconnectedness in terms of responsibility, ownership, all of those things. So there's a lot to be lost when you break up the system. But I think, as you say, rightly, the system can be reformed. I'm not a sociologist in that sense, and I think they have a lot to say on that. And I think I mean, but I really think there's something shifting. I can feel it in my work. I can feel it in the problems that come up, the encounters that women are having, that men are having. Something is changing. And yet now in Ireland, because I am an Irish-based therapist, there is definitely still a huge grow, as we would put it, for the marriage route, for sure. And I don't think that's going to change in Ireland probably for another, we're probably in that 40, 50 years. You know, it's going to take that time. It's a generational thing, I think, for that to shift and become less the norm. Presently, it's still the absolute norm.
In your experience and in terms of your clinical practice, I was curious about this question. Can relationships recover from infidelity? I wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, well, infidelity. Infidelity is almost always a destroyer, I think, in relationships. Particularly, I suppose there's a timing factor. You know, it probably has a greater sort of destructive quality at the beginning than it does a little later, although also has the power to destroy it. It also depends why it happened, how it happened. You know, was it a one-night stand? Was it with drink? Was it opportunistic? Was it, you know, was it unintended? Or was it, you know, did it involve lying over 6 months, 2 years? And was there love? You know, was it a love affair? Infidelity, you know, we like to think of infidelity as somebody cheating on somebody, and somebody is bad and somebody isn't. And I see infidelity in a bigger framework, and I see it as somebody finding themselves maybe just with opportunity and maybe just being weak in the moment. Fine. Somebody maybe having drink and being and falling, you know, falling into the moment. Not admirable, maybe, not great, whatever. But there's all sorts, you know, you may not admire the person for it, but, you know, we're just people. People make mistakes. That's the world we navigate. But I think that also there is usually something shifting around it. You know, we like to think it's just somebody, you know, does the wrong thing. But usually behind it, there is you know, it's often a reach out for independence. It's a reach out for maybe more sex. Maybe it's a reach out for more satisfaction. That was always the old style thing. Oh, somebody's not getting what they need at home. You know, well, it's a much bigger picture than that. I often think it's also, is somebody reaching out for that sort of part of themselves that they feel has sort of died in the relationship or is dying. And those kinds of situations, they can be fixed, because maybe the person still does love and want the relationship that they're in, but this act of sexual infidelity has in some way put words on or acted out what should have been spoken out. And I suppose that's where I come in often, is in drawing that together. And I've certainly seen that many times, and I've seen it successfully dealt with. Trust obviously can be difficult afterwards, but good couples can work that out, you know. Yeah, I think now if it's a 20-year affair, we're talking about a different level. So there's a few levels there.
On your podcast, there was a fascinating story. You were treating or working with a man who was seeing an escort at lunchtime, right?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But, and it was.
I mean, almost every lunchtime.
So 5 days a week, he's in the office. That is. What do you think how prevalent is sex addiction? Would you describe that to sex addiction, or is there something else going on there?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed that clip, the full episode should be right about down here. Like, comment, share, maybe share with somebody you think could benefit from the episode. Big thanks to everybody that has subscribed so far. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.